The rain didn't just fall, it roared, a relentless curtain drowning Seattle's streets in a symphony of chaos. I stood at the crosswalk, my trench coat soaked, cursing the meeting that had kept me late at the law firm. Then I saw him, a man curled against a brick wall, his tattered coat no match for the storm. He wasn't just another shadow in the city's margins. Something about him stopped me cold. The way his shoulders hunched, not in defeat, but as if guarding a secret. I don't know why I crossed the street. Maybe it was the ache in my chest, the kind that comes from too many nights alone in a high-rise apartment. But I did. "Hey," I called, my voice barely cutting through the rain. "You okay?" He lifted his head, and his eyes hit me like lightning. They were green, sharp, and impossibly alive, cutting through the gray of the evening. "Depends," he said, his voice low, almost musical, with a faint drawl I couldn't place. "You offering salvation or just pity?" I froze. No one had ever spoken to me like that. Raw, unguarded, like he saw right through my polished suit and straight to the mess underneath. "My name is Ethan Caldwell, 32, a corporate lawyer who'd built a life on control, on keeping people at arm's length." But in that moment, under the weight of his gaze, I felt exposed. "I'm offering a coffee," I said, gesturing to the cafe across the street. "Maybe a dry seat." He studied me, rain dripping from his matted brown hair. "You don't look like the type to play Good Samaritan." "Maybe I'm not," I shot back, surprising myself. "But you look like you could use a break." He smirked, a flicker of something, amusement, maybe defiance, crossing his face. "All right, stranger, lead the way." Inside the cafe, the warmth hit like a wave, the scent of espresso grounding me. He slid into the booth across from me, his wet coat leaving a puddle on the floor. Up close, he was younger than I'd thought, maybe mid-20s, with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass and a quiet intensity that made the air feel heavier. "I'm Ethan," I said, extending a hand. He hesitated, then shook it. His grip was firm, his skin cold but rough, like he'd lived 100 lives. "Lucas," he said simply, no last name. "Just Lucas." The barista brought our coffees, and I watched him wrap his hands around the mug, savoring the heat. "So," I said, trying to sound casual, "what's your story?" He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You don't want my story, Ethan. It's not pretty. Try me." He leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "You ever feel like the world's moving on without you? Like you're screaming, but no one hears?" I swallowed hard. I knew that feeling too well. Nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering why success felt so hollow. "Yeah," I admitted, "more than I'd like." He tilted his head, surprised, like he hadn't expected honesty. "Well then, maybe we're not so different, you and me." The words hung there, heavy with possibility. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, the rain, the cafe, his voice, would unravel everything I thought I knew about myself. Over the next hour, Lucas spoke in fragments like he was testing me. He'd been on the streets for 2 years, he said, after a fallout with his family in Georgia. He didn't elaborate, but the way his voice tightened told me it wasn't just a disagreement. It was a wound, raw and unhealed. I didn't push. Instead, I told him about my life, the endless depositions, the corner office I clawed my way to, the fiancé who'd left me a year ago because I was too married to my work. "Sounds lonely," Lucas said, his eyes softening. "It is," I said, the truth slipping out before I could stop it. "But you keep moving, right? You don't stop to feel it." He nodded, like he understood. "Except sometimes you do, and it's like the whole world shifts." The cafe was closing, the barista wiping down tables. I didn't want to leave, not yet. "Look," I said, my heart pounding, "my place isn't far. You can crash on my couch, dry off. Just for tonight." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "You don't even know me. I know you're freezing, and I've got a spare blanket. That's enough for now." He studied me, searching for an angle, a catch. Finding none, he nodded. "All right, but don't say I didn't warn you." We walked the 3 blocks to my apartment, the rain lighter now, but still relentless. Inside, I handed him a towel and pointed to the couch. Make yourself at home. He looked around, taking in the sleek furniture, the view of the city skyline. Nice cage, he said not unkindly. I laughed, surprising myself again. Yeah, well, it's mine. As he settled on the couch, I caught myself staring. There was something about him, broken, yes, but not defeated, like a fire that refused to go out. I turned away, my chest tight with something I couldn't name. That night, I lay awake, listening to the rain and the sound of his breathing from the living room. I didn't know why I brought him here, why I cared, but I did, and that scared me more than anything. The next morning, sunlight streamed through my apartment windows, painting the room in gold. Lucas was already awake, standing by the kitchen counter, his borrowed sweatshirt too big on his lean frame. He was holding a mug of coffee I hadn't made, looking out at the city like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "You're up early," I said, rubbing sleep from my eyes. "Habit," he replied, not turning. "Streets don't let you sleep in." I nodded, unsure what to say. The night before felt like a dream, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. Now, in the harsh light of day, I wondered if I'd made a mistake bringing him here. But then he turned, and his smile, small, unguarded, hit me like a punch. "Thanks," he said, "for last night. Most people don't see me." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Most people are idiots." He laughed, and it was the first real laugh I'd heard from him, warm and rough like gravel. "You're not what I expected, Ethan. What did you expect? Some rich guy looking for a charity case to feel good about?" I winced. He wasn't entirely wrong. I'd been that guy before, tossing a few bucks into a cup and walking away. But this was different. Lucas was different. "And you?" I asked. "What's your deal?" He set the mug down, his expression darkening. "You really want to know?" I nodded, leaning against the counter. "I asked, didn't I?" He took a deep breath, like he was bracing himself. "I grew up in a small town, Georgia. Preacher dad, big family, the whole American dream. Except I didn't fit. I was different." He paused, his eyes flicking to mine, searching. "I like guys. Always did. When I told my dad, he called it a sin, said I was broken. Kicked me out at 17. The words landed heavy, and I felt a pang in my chest. I'd grown up in a liberal Seattle suburb. My parents more absent than strict, but I knew what it was to hide parts of yourself. "That's rough," I said, hating how inadequate it sounded. "Yeah, well," he said, shrugging. "You survive. You learn who you can trust." "And who's that?" He looked at me, his gaze steady. "Not sure yet." The air between us shifted, charged with something unspoken. I broke eye contact, grabbing a mug to pour myself coffee, my hands unsteady. "You can stay another night," I said, the words spilling out. "If you want." He didn't answer right away, just watched me. "Why are you doing this, Ethan? Really?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. I didn't have an answer, not one I could articulate. All I knew was that for the first time in years, I didn't feel numb. Over the next few days, Lucas became a fixture in my apartment. He didn't talk much about his past, but he dropped bits and pieces. How he'd hitchhiked to Seattle, how he'd worked odd jobs until the streets swallowed him. I didn't press, I just listened. In return, I told him things I hadn't told anyone. How my ex, Mark, had called me cold, how I'd buried myself and worked to avoid feeling anything at all. "You're not cold," Lucas said one night, sprawled on my couch with a book he'd borrowed from my shelf. "You're just scared." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Scared of what?" "Of this," he said, gesturing vaguely. "Letting someone in." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. He was right. And the way he looked at me, like he saw every crack in my armor, made me want to run and stay all at once. On the fourth night, we sat on the balcony, the city glittering below. The rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and clean. Lucas leaned back, his eyes on the stars. "You ever think about starting over?" he asked. "All the time," I admitted. "But it's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because I've got a life, a career, responsibilities." He turned to me, his expression serious. "And what's that life giving you, Ethan?" Really, I didn't have an answer. Instead, I looked at him, at the way the city lights caught in his eyes, and felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just attraction, though God knows I was there, simmering under the surface. It was something deeper, like he was waking up a part of me I'd buried long ago. "Lucas," I said, my voice low, "what are we doing here?" He didn't answer with words. Instead, he reached out, his fingers brushing mine, tentative but deliberate. My breath caught, and for a moment, the world was just us, two broken souls on a balcony, daring to hope. The days blurred into a rhythm I hadn't known I craved. Lucas stayed, and my apartment, once a sterile showcase of success, felt alive. He'd leave for hours, doing God knows what, but always came back, his presence filling the space with a warmth I couldn't explain. One evening, I came home from a firm to find him cooking, actual cooking, not just microwaving leftovers. The smell of garlic and herbs hit me as I walked in, and there he was, stirring a pot of pasta, his sleeves rolled up, a faint smile on his face. "You cook?" I asked, dropping my briefcase. "Used to," he said. "My mom taught me before everything." The everything hung heavy, but I didn't pry. Instead, I grabbed a beer from a fridge and leaned against the counter, watching him. "You're full of surprises, Lucas." He glanced at me, his eyes glinting. "You have no idea." Dinner was simple, pasta with a makeshift sauce, but it was the best meal I'd had in years. We sat at my rarely used dining table, talking about nothing and everything. Music, movies, the way the city looked at night. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to perform, to be the perfect lawyer, the perfect son, the perfect anything. I was just Ethan, and that was enough. But the ease didn't last. Later that night, as we washed dishes side by side, he went quiet, his movements tense. "What's wrong?" I asked, drying a plate. He didn't look at me. "I can't stay here forever, Ethan. You know that." The words hit like a punch. "Why not?" "Because this," he gestured around at the apartment, at us. "It's not real. You're playing house with a stray, but I don't belong here." "That's bullshit," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "You think I'm just what? Slumming it? You think I don't care?" He turned to me, his eyes fierce. "I think you're lonely, and I'm convenient. But I'm not your project, Ethan. I got my own demons." I stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat of him. "And what if I want you here? Not as a project, but as you..." His breath hitched, and for a moment, I thought he'd pull away. Instead, he reached out, his hand cupping my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. "You don't know what you're asking," he whispered. "Then show me," I said, my voice barely audible. He kissed me then, fierce and desperate, like he was pouring every unspoken word into it. I kissed him back, my hands finding his waist, pulling him closer. The world fell away, the dishes, the apartment, the weight of my carefully constructed life. There was only Lucas, his taste, his heat, his truth. The next morning, I woke to an empty apartment. Panic clawed at me as I checked the couch, the balcony, the bathroom. His bag was gone, his borrowed clothes folded neatly on the couch. No note, no explanation, just absence. I called in sick to work, something I hadn't done in years, and spent the day scouring the city. I checked the cafe, the alley where I'd found him, every shelter I could find. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished, like he'd never been real. By evening, I was back at the cafe, nursing a coffee and a growing ache in my chest. The barista, a kind-eyed woman named Claire, noticed my mood. "You looking for that guy you were with?" she asked. I nodded, throat tight. "He's gone." She hesitated, then slid a napkin across the counter. "He was here this morning. Left this." On the napkin, in Lucas's jagged handwriting, was a single line. "I'm not running from you. I'm running from me." I stared at it, my heart pounding. He wasn't gone for good. He couldn't be. But why had he left? What was he afraid of? And why did it feel like my entire world had tilted off its axis? I didn't sleep that night. Lucas's note burned in my pocket, his words looping in my mind. "I'm not running from you. I'm running from me." What did that mean? Was he carrying that made him bolt after a kiss that felt like it could have changed everything? I went back to work, but I was a ghost, moving through meetings and emails without focus. My colleagues noticed. My boss, Karen, even pulled me aside to ask if I was okay. I lied, said it was just stress, but the truth was I was unraveling. Lucas had cracked something open in me, and I couldn't shove it back down. On the third day, I found him. It was pure chance. A glimpse of his familiar coat in a park near the waterfront. He was sitting on a bench, staring at the Puget Sound, his face unreadable. My heart leapt, but I approached slowly, afraid he'd bolt again. "Lucas," I said, stopping a few feet away. He turned, and the relief in his eyes was fleeting, replaced by something guarded. "You're persistent," he said. "You're hard to forget," I replied, sitting beside him. "Why'd you leave?" He looked away, his jaw tight. "I told you. It's not you." "Then what? Talk to me, Lucas. Please." He took a shaky breath, his hands clenching in his lap. "I've been running a long time, Ethan. For my family, for myself. That night what happened between us, it was too much. Too real. I don't know how to do this. How to be someone who stays." My chest ached, but I kept my voice steady. "You don't have to have it all figured out. Just don't run. Not for me." He looked at me, then his eyes raw. "You don't get it. I'm a mess. I've got nothing. No home, no future. You've got this life, this world. I don't fit in it. Stop deciding what I want," I said, my voice rising. "I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for you." He stared at me, and for a moment, I thought he'd kiss me again. Instead, he stood, pacing. "You don't know the half of it, Ethan. My dad, he didn't just kick me out. He made sure I knew I was nothing. And out here, on the streets, you start to believe it." I stood too, closing the distance. "You're not nothing. You're the first person who's made me feel alive in years. You think I care about your past? I care about you." He stopped, his breath ragged. "Why?" "Because you see me," I said, my voice breaking. "Not the suit, not the job, the real me. And I see you, Lucas. All of you." He didn't speak, but he didn't pull away when I reached for his hand. We stood there, the sound of the water and the city wrapping around us, and I knew we were at a crossroads. He could run again, or he could stay. And I could keep hiding, or I could fight for this for us. Over the next week, Lucas came back to the apartment, but things were different. There was a cautious hope between us, like we were both afraid to break it. We talked more, laughed more, but the kiss lingered unspoken, a line we hadn't crossed again. Not yet. I started making changes, small ones, but they felt huge. I cut back my hours at the firm, started saying no to late nights. I wanted time, not just for Lucas, but for myself, for the life I'd forgotten how to live. One night, as we sat on the couch, a movie playing in the background, Lucas turned to me. "You're different," he said. "Lighter." I smiled, my heart full. "You're not so bad yourself." He leaned closer, his voice soft. "I'm trying, Ethan. For you." I took his hand, my thumb tracing his knuckles. "We'll figure it out. Together." Months passed, and Lucas became more than a guest. He became home. He got a job at a bookstore, his love of stories shining through in a way that made my heart swell. I left the firm, took a lower-paying job at a nonprofit, trading my corner office for a life that felt real. We were building something, not just a relationship, but a future. But shadows lingered. Lucas still carried his past, and I saw it in the way he'd tense when his phone rang, in the nightmares that woke him some nights. One evening, as we walked through Pike Place Market, he stopped dead, his face pale. I followed his gaze to a man in a suit, older, with a preacher's stern posture. "My father," Lucas whispered, his voice trembling. I took his hand, grounding him. "You don't have to face him alone." He shook his head, but he didn't let go. The man, his father, spotted us, his eyes narrowing as he approached. "Lucas," he said, his voice cold. "So this is where you've been." Lucas straightened, his grip on my hand tightening. "Yeah, this is where I belong." His father's gaze flicked to our joined hands, his lip curling. "You're still chasing sin." "No," Lucas said, his voice steady now. "I'm chasing happiness. Something you never understood." The man opened his mouth, but I stepped forward, my voice calm but firm. He's not your son anymore. He's mine. The words surprised even me, but they felt right. Lucas looked at me, his eyes shining with something new, pride, maybe, or love. His father walked away, and Lucas let out a breath he'd been holding for years. That night, we stood on the balcony, the city alive below us. Lucas leaned against me, his head on my shoulder. "You meant that?" he asked. "What you said?" "Every word," I said, kissing his temple. "You're my home, Lucas." He turned, his eyes searching mine. "I love you, Ethan." The words hit me like the rain that night we met. Fierce, unstoppable, life-changing. "I love you too," I said, and kissed him, slow and deep, under the stars. We weren't perfect. We'd fight, we'd falter, but we'd keep going. Because that's what love is, not a destination, but a journey. And we were walking it together. One rainy night, I'd picked up a stranger, and he'd given me everything. A purpose, a partner, a life worth living. The world could keep its judgment, its rules, its expectations. We had each other, and that was enough.